Entrepreneurship in Maine, especially now. Entrepreneurship has surged during the pandemic. The U.S. Census Bureau reports a dramatic spike in new business startups during 2020 and 2021. Some people started their own businesses because they lost their jobs during the pandemic. Others were part of the Great Resignation, voluntarily leaving their old careers to pursue something more fulfilling, closer to home, or finally being one's own boss. I'm Jennifer Rooks. Today on Maine Calling, we will look at how this is playing out here. Maine has always been an entrepreneurial state, full of small and family businesses. What did we see during the pandemic? What kinds of startups are trending? What are the early success stories, and what resources are there to help would-be entrepreneurs in Maine? Maine Calling is next, but first, this news. Welcome to Maine Calling. I'm Jennifer Rooks. The middle of a pandemic may seem like a tricky time to start a business, but that has been happening here in Maine and across the nation. Today, we'll hear from entrepreneurs of all kinds about Maine's business climate. Joining me, Tom Rainey, who is Executive Director of the Maine Center for Entrepreneurs, and Renee Kelly, Assistant Vice President for Innovation and Economic Development at the University of Maine. We invite your questions and your comments. Send an email to talk@mainepublic.org, tweet @MaineCalling, post a comment to our Facebook page or to Instagram, or give us a call at 1-800-399-3566. Again, 1-800-399-3566. And we want to note here that this show is part of our series of programs looking at Maine's evolving economy. And if you have started a business during the pandemic, if you're thinking about becoming an entrepreneur, give us a call, 1-800-399-3566. Tom Rainey, I was on the U.S. Census Bureau's site this morning, and I saw a really dramatic graph. It looked at the number of new business startups, or I guess business applications. And when you look at the years 2020 and 2021, I think the word spike is an understatement. It is a dramatic increase. I'm guessing people have done this out of necessity. They've lost their job and just tried to figure out something to pay the rent. But I sense there's probably something bigger going on here. What is your sense of what's happened during the pandemic?
Jennifer, first of all, I'm thrilled to be here talking about entrepreneurship, which is my favorite subject. So adversity is the mother of invention. You know the old adage. And it really shakes up the economy. It gets things moving in different directions, and people are sort of forced to get out of their comfort zone. Sometimes people lose their jobs, they're laid off, and they're just forced to try new things. And maybe they've had a business plan either in their head or in their back pocket that they wanted to launch, and this is the time to do it. I've seen that in many other places where I've worked, where there's been major defense downsizings or major disruption in the space industry. Other industry areas where people are really forced to get out of their comfort zone and start businesses.
Here in Maine, Tom, what are we seeing? Are there trends in what kind of businesses have been started in the last couple of years?
Well, we are seeing, businesses started all across the board. So we traditionally have a very strong focus around food and beverage. We see a lot of companies in that space here in Maine, but really digital health, biosciences, a lot of aquaculture companies, new apps that are being developed. So really, it's all across the board. We have 8 different programs that we operate at the Maine Center for Entrepreneurs to help companies. And more recently, in addition to the general programs that we offer, sort of the boot camp style training programs, we've been focusing on some very industry specific support as well to support folks that are interested in, for example, in the outdoor brands industry. We've been working with that group very closely here recently to help companies in that space. So yeah, it's all across the board really, but a lot of food and beverage, outdoor brands, it's things that you would imagine coming out of Maine, like aquaculture, and we've seen a lot of activity.
Renee, what do we know about how Maine ranks in terms of entrepreneurship compared to other states? My sense is that Maine is known for being an entrepreneurial state, but by by the kinds of ways that it's measured in terms of how successful are entrepreneurs in Maine, how many are able to employ more people as the years go by and succeed. How do we rank?
Maine ranks really, really well. We rank in the top 10 for a whole bunch of measures like the survival, what we call the survival rate of businesses after 1 year of being in business. We have a very high rate of entrepreneurs who end up being successful and going on to hire people. So not just aspiring for self-employment, but actually growing a business that would employ other people. You see that Maine ranks very highly in the top 5 or the top 10 in some of those areas.
What is a high rate? What is considered a high rate of success for an entrepreneur?
Yeah, well, in Maine, what we saw last year is the first year survival rate was around 80%. So that's, a lot of people think entrepreneurship is a very risky endeavor, and it's not to say that there aren't risks associated with it, but I do think in Maine we have a great support system, and that does help our Maine entrepreneurs be more successful than they might see in other places around the country.
Tom, what are some questions that would-be entrepreneurs ought to ask themselves to be in that 80% who are going to survive the first year and maybe even 5 years or 10 years, thrive and grow? What do you suggest that people ask themselves before they jump into the deep end?
As much as I love entrepreneurship and as much as I spend, most of my waking hours promoting entrepreneurship, there are people who are not cut out to be entrepreneurs. It requires taking a lot of risk. It requires, taking calculated risk, I should say, getting out and interacting with a lot of different people that are going to help you become successful. And so, if you tend to be more of a sort of an introverted person and you tend not to be too comfortable with taking some kind of calculated risks, starting a company and being an entrepreneur may not be for you. So, it really depends a lot on your personality, and you can also be successful as an entrepreneur by surrounding yourself with other folks that can augment your skills and help support you in those areas. So if you really are truly an introvert but still want to launch a company, if you surround yourself with the right group of folks, then you can still be successful.
Renee, I know traditionally, there have been certain groups that have been more successful in finding funding for their ventures and other groups that have had trouble finding access to capital. I'm wondering if you can talk about whether and how this is changing.
No, I think some of that has been pretty constant through the pandemic, but one of the interesting developments through the pandemic is the investment that government has made in entrepreneurs and business survival, recognizing it was a pretty difficult environment for a lot of entrepreneurs over the past year and a half. So for instance, the Paycheck Protection Program, for instance, obviously was a huge bridge for companies that suffered losses during the pandemic, and that kind of funding wasn't necessarily readily available to companies in the past. And another interesting thing that the state is planning to launch through the ARP, America's Rescue Plan funding, is some funding to support companies that suffered losses but were pre-revenue, meaning they hadn't sold products or services yet. They weren't eligible to get Paycheck Protection Program funding because they didn't have a demonstrated history to show the Small Business Administration. So the state is looking to address the needs of some of those entrepreneurs. And then in terms of companies or entrepreneurs who are trying to develop innovative new products and services, the Maine Technology Institute is an incredible resource that actually provides grant funding for early stage companies and even more established companies to help them bring those new products or services to market. And they have more money coming into their organization as well to support a range of entrepreneurs through the America's Rescue Plan. So there's a lot of funding in the mix over the next couple of years, which hopefully can really create a great opportunity for folks who are just thinking about becoming entrepreneurs or those who want to take their businesses to the next level.
Tom, do you have a favorite story or two about entrepreneurs who have made the plunge during the pandemic in the last couple of years?
Well, first of all, I'd just like to echo what Renee just said about this, the state funding. I really want to underscore that, because the funding that's coming to the state right now is probably once in a lifetime sort of game-changing levels of funding, tens of millions of dollars that are going to flow through these different agencies. And so, we think here at the Maine Center for Entrepreneurs, one of the best things we can do at this point in time is help educate companies on how to access that funding, which pot of funding is most appropriate for their business at this point in time. So we're going to be doing a lot of training in that space starting this month, helping companies understand and really put together their wish list. But there are a lot of companies that we've been working with that have been very successful during the pandemic, and some of them have been required to pivot from their original business plan. But as I mentioned earlier, we're working with 37 different food companies through our Food Accelerator program. And after the initial shock of the pandemic hit, quite a few of them pivoted and were actually able to grow their businesses, and some very aggressively. Some of them, the whole pandemic forced them to accelerate their e-commerce strategy, for example, something that they would have had to do probably otherwise anyway. But the pandemic really sort of lit a fire under their need to go online and start selling their products online. So we've spent a lot of time educating our companies on e-commerce strategies, everything from how to package your product for e-commerce to food safety issues to how to use strategic trade data to get into markets that make the most sense for their products. So we spend a lot of time educating companies on those things. So yeah, it's been really quite inspiring to watch these companies, how resilient they have been and how they have been able to adapt and pivot their businesses as necessary.
Renee, I know the University of Maine is able to work with many startups in Maine. Tell me how that works, and tell me about some of the companies that the university works with.
Sure. Well, we work with entrepreneurs in a variety of capacities. In terms of supporting entrepreneurial business development, we have support for companies that are really developing new products and innovations. That's really our expertise that we can help support companies with. But we also are really strongly trying to encourage students to consider entrepreneurship while they're still in school. We have an actual facility here on campus where students can get support to test their ideas and explore entrepreneurship and help them get funding. And then a big part of the way the university supports entrepreneurs is through our research and development facilities and expertise. So I like to say that the University of Maine is like the R&D lab for all the small businesses in the state that don't have the capacity to have their own research and development facilities. They can come and access 3D printing and manufacturing support, or testing a new food product. All of those facilities and the expertise to help use those facilities is available here at UMaine.
And some of them are super high tech, and some of them are really very, very simple, right?
Absolutely. I mean, we have some entrepreneurs who, one that comes to mind, had an idea for a new kind of clothespin, and came to our advanced manufacturing center and prototyped and designed a new clothespin. And then others, as you said, are very high tech, aerospace or composite materials, or a whole variety of technologies based here in Maine.
We'll go to Frank, who's calling from Brunswick. Hi, Frank. Go ahead.
Can you hear me okay?
I can. Go ahead.
Very good. Okay. My name is Frank Keller, and I like to call myself a serial entrepreneur. And over the years, I don't do it anymore. I've been cured. I've had a new business every 5 years. Some have done very well. Some haven't done so well. So there's a lot of cautions. I mean, everybody starts out really enthusiastic. You've got nice products to sell. They're unique products. you have no competition and you're successful. And then somebody shows up and says, I can do that too. And then you get competition. And then when you get competition, you get a little ticked off by it. And then you get staff stealing recipes and what have you. I had a whole grain bakery, Maine's first whole grain bakery. And sometimes you just jump the gun and you really have products or services which are way in advance of the marketplace. For example, alternative energy. I did alternative energy studies for 5 years too. So it's just there's a caution involved in it. One of the worst possible things is not during the excitement phase when you start to get new customers, but when you start to get competitors and your competitors show up and they use your names and they do things like that. So you have to kind of ride that out. You have to sit on your customer base. You have to groom your customer base. And usually, the 5 years came because most commercial leases are up in 5 years. So you figure out some way to transfer your business over to someone else and the vision that you had. So, for example, the people that bought the bakery kept the vision of a whole grain bakery intact. It was just wonderful. It was a better bakery than when I owned it and ran it. So I could go on about these.
Yeah, well, Frank, some words of wisdom there, and let me see if I've gleaned a couple of them correctly. Watch out for competitors, and maybe look at kind of a 5-year business cycle, looking at maybe selling or moving on. Tom, what do you make of some of Frank's advice here?
Well, spot on. One of the things we train our entrepreneurs to do is customer discovery and get out and, talk to a lot of prospective customers for the product or service that they're planning to launch or that they are launching. And also to look at the competitive landscape and really understand who else is out there and to really drill down into their unique value proposition and what makes them different from the competition. And part of that also is built into the pitch competitions that we do that help companies really hone their message and get out in front of an audience, whether it's prospective investors or prospective customers, and really tell their story effectively and distinguish why they're different from the competition.
Frank, thanks so much for your call. I'll go to Chris, who's calling from Portland. Hi, Chris. Go ahead.
Well, hello there, Jennifer. Hello there, Tom. Chris Cast here.
Oh, hi,
Hey, Chris.
Go ahead.
Hey. Yeah, I'm calling. It's not about a business that I started, but it's a business I helped launch in June of 2020. And it was one of those decisions that we decided, well, is this a good time to launch or not? It's a business called Rugged Seas, ruggedseas.com, and it's a brand that takes fishing bibs and old gear and recycles them into clutches, bags, roll tops. And we were kind of nervous. But when we hit launch, and we didn't do much in terms of advertising except for, a lot of work on Instagram that one of the owners, a person by the name of Nikki Strout, does a great job doing. So from June of 2020 to December of 2020, the company had over $250,000 in sales.
Wow.
Congratulations. Chris,
and
can I ask you what your word of wisdom for a would-be entrepreneur would be?
Yeah, my words of wisdom are this. Never be afraid of what your products cost. What it costs is what it costs. The market will find you. And be not bold, but be real to yourself and what your mission is. And one of the things that we've learned is Rugged Seas gives back. As part of their mission, they give back to the Maine Coast Fishermen's Association, a portion of all sales. Gives back, as well as we give money back to the Maine Lobstermen's Community Alliance. And what we found working with our customers and working with the people who buy the products is that they really feel connected to the hard work that the fishermen do. I think that sense of, and I hate to use the word authenticity because it's kind of like genuine or quality. It's become like almost a cliche and a passé cliche, but just keeping it real. One of the owners of the company, Taylor Strout, is a fisherman. And he goes out to Dutch Harbor, Alaska, leaves his family and 3 boys behind, and fishes for 3 months at a time in the Bering Sea, and quite literally, faces 35-foot swells, and
Well,
every
I
time
want
it
to
goes
get
back,
I want to get back to that idea about keeping it real, but I have to go to a break. So we'll return to that idea. Chris, thank you so much for calling in. This is Maine Calling. We'll be right back.
Listener support brings us Maine Calling with help from A Family for Me, a Spurwink program dedicated to finding families for Maine children in foster care. Learn more at afamilyformemaine.org. And by Evergreen Home Performance, a locally owned energy efficiency company with career opportunities available. Details at evergreenyourhome.com.
On the next Speaking in Maine, the future of war, with author, strategist, and expert on international relations, Sean McFade.
So the real national security debate we need to have as a country is, if this is the trend of modern warfare, how do we fight as a democracy secretly without losing our democratic soul?
From the Mid-Coast Forum on Foreign Relations. That's coming up on Speaking in Maine, Tuesday afternoon at 2, here on Maine Public Radio.
Maine Public is seeking new applicants to serve on our Community Advisory Board. The Community Advisory Board serves in an advisory role to Maine Public's Board of Trustees and staff. It consists of between 15 and 20 volunteer members from around the state who meet twice a year to offer feedback to Maine Public on a variety of topics, including content, programming, audience engagement, and membership. For more information and to apply, please visit mainepublic.org/CAB. Please note the deadline to apply is October 10th, and thank you for your interest.
Welcome back. This is Maine Calling. I'm Jennifer Rooks. Today on the show, we are talking about entrepreneurship. My guest, Tom Rainey, Executive Director of the Maine Center for Entrepreneurs, and Renee Kelly, Assistant Vice President for Innovation and Economic Development at UMaine. Share your comments or questions via email, talk@mainepublic.org, tweet @MaineCalling, post a comment on Facebook or Instagram, or give us a call at 1-800-399-3566. Renee and Tom, really quickly, I want to get back to what Chris Cass was talking about before the break, and that was this idea that it's a really good idea, Renee, to be authentic, to be real. You're nodding.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about starting a business, it takes an incredible amount of effort. So it has to be something that should be something that you personally care about. So you have to put your own sort of personal authenticity into it. But also, I think, and this is one of the ways that Maine really shines, I think people outside of Maine look at products from Maine as being authentic, being real. People in Maine are real, so they expect the products that are coming from Maine to have that same level of authenticity. And consumers can see through sort of something that doesn't seem to live up to its hype. And Maine's done a really good job in its food and other types of products to leverage that Maine brand.
Tom.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. The Maine brand is super strong. One of the, I was just thinking about the other advantages that we have here in Maine that really make us sort of unique, and that is there's an incredible spirit of generosity in people giving back, or sort of paying forward in terms of mentorship and folks' willingness to come in and help mentor new entrepreneurs. So we have what we call the Maine Mentor Network, which is about 200 subject matter experts from many different areas that come together and volunteer their time. And we're able to match them up with the entrepreneurs in our network. And over the years, we've formed relationships with other strategic organizations that have benefited from this mentor network. And we serve as sort of curators and matchmakers to match up these folks who are interested in giving back. And it's just a fabulous resource to have here in Maine.
On the line with us now, Toby Arends, who is Program Director for Focus Maine. Toby, thanks so much for calling in.
Yeah, thanks very much for taking my call, Jennifer. And as usual, you have incredible guests in both Tom and Renee. Renee's been an incredible champion for the university system programs, and Maine Center for Entrepreneurs is a partner organization of ours. And Tom's done a great job growing his programs to serve business needs, not only for startups and entrepreneurs, which I think is the focus of today, but also larger companies. So I wanted just to share quickly a little bit about Focus Maine supported programs. We support a number of different programs to help de-risk business growth, and we're focused primarily on the food economy, both ag and aquaculture, as well as biotechnology. And maybe before I talk about a couple of examples and ways in which we partner, I want to reiterate something that Tom said in terms of skill sets for entrepreneurs. I think in addition to being outgoing and being able, willing to take on risk, often there are very different skill sets needed to take, to develop an incredible recipe or a prototype that serves a market need and then build a really strong business. And so even at the early stages, you need to understand costs, you need to know sales and marketing and target markets. And these are, often very different than, starting with an idea. And, some of the programs that we support help take those recipes and ideas to market. So just to mention a couple of the great partner organizations we work with, certainly Tom's organization, the Maine Center for Entrepreneurs, his food accelerator programs that he mentioned quickly, Cultivator and Market Share. There's another program at Coastal Enterprises, the Tastemakers program, that also provides really great support for debottlenecking food companies. And business participation in these companies comes with a modest amount of grant funding, but as importantly, to again reiterate something that Tom just mentioned, there's just an incredible mentor network that they have access to of people that are eager to help. Another organization that is not a formal partner of ours, but also has access to deep mentorship networks, the SBDC and SCORE. So I wanted to make sure to plug them as well. And then just one other quick example of support we offer in aquaculture. The Gulf of Maine Research Institute and Maine Aquaculture Association are two strong partners, and they've put together this incredible website called the MaineAquaculturist.org with lots of resources for entrepreneurs that are thinking of starting up aquaculture businesses, links to grant funding, explanations of financing types that are available, financial modeling, and other. So thank you very much for taking my call.
Yeah, you mentioned Focus Maine is focused on job creation and business support in agriculture, aquaculture, and biotech. I'm wondering what changes you've seen since the start of the pandemic. What's going on in those sectors right now?
Yeah, so you mentioned earlier in the show the big uptick in new business creation, but a lot of businesses were really hard hit, and so entrepreneurs are risk averse, but there are limits to this, and so there's so many disruptions, personal lives, health concerns, supply chains, costs, and labor availability, and so I think we've seen some of this risk tolerance maybe transition a bit to completely understandable risk aversion. And so for many companies, that means, some of the grant programs that are available, taking advantage of grant programs rather than, wanting to take on more debt with uncertainty in the future. Interest in our partner programs has really grown. So many of these programs are subsidized heavily or offered free of cost. I'm sure Tom's going to talk about his programs. I'll give a quick example of the Coastal Enterprises program, Tastemakers. It provides funding for food and beverage companies, and the number of applicants this last year increased by 50%. The funds requested more than quadrupled, so we're really seeing enormous interest in grant funding and access to programs that help de-risk business decisions.
Can you give us an example of how some businesses have used Focus Maine's programs to adapt?
Sure. So yeah, again, Tom touched on them. So one was a shift, certainly for some of the food businesses, to shift from food service to retail, or for retail to direct to consumer. So a few examples are Ocean's Balance, an incredible seaweed products company that used their funding to expand an online presence. Good to Go, which is based in Kittery, incredible dehydrated meals for camping and backpacking, and saw interest surge this last year. That was a really great example of how the pandemic actually helped their business, and they used funding to help facility design for an expansion. Luke's Lobster was an interesting example where they used funding to build processing capacity and diversify their supply chain. They have an incredibly strong brand, a strong commitment to sustainability, but also had exposure to restaurant sales that were hit really hard by the pandemic. And so our funding helped in a small way adapt to some of these changes. Pemberton's Gourmet, another really great company with pasta sauces and salsas and marinades. They work with independent companies to take other companies' recipes to market and co-packing services. And they also have used Tom's programming to help navigate this past year. So those are just a few examples among many.
Well, I appreciate you calling in, Toby. Toby Arends with the Program Director for Focus Maine. I appreciate you calling in and taking part in Maine Calling today. Now we're going to go to Holly Aker, and Holly is the Program Manager of the Veterans Business Outreach Center of New England. And Holly, thanks for giving us a call.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for including me in this conversation. And I'm so thrilled to be able to join so many of Maine's incredible community resource partners that are out there for entrepreneurs in the state.
Yeah, and just having this program is an example of how many resources there are. Tell us what the Veterans Business Outreach Center does and some of the businesses, the entrepreneurs you've worked with, especially over the past couple of years.
Sure. The Veterans Business Outreach Center is one of the core resource partners of the SBA, supporting entrepreneurs and business owners through entrepreneurial development services such as business training and counseling, helping to identify resources that might be available to help businesses start and grow. We've been working with transitioning service members and veterans, National Guard and reservists, and even military spouses to help develop opportunities, recognize opportunities in their community, and grow their own businesses. Throughout the pandemic, we've really worked with a variety of different small businesses and entrepreneurs, but have really seen our veteran community wanting to meet the needs of the pandemic and make opportunities and changes to their business pivot from CPR training to respiratory mask fitting and COVID compliance training, or see the needs of distribution and transportation and really step up to meet those logistical needs.
So that's a trend you've seen, that not only have there been entrepreneurs who are veterans who have started businesses during the pandemic, but that many of those jobs have really been sort of pandemic specific.
Yeah, I think veteran entrepreneurs are very comfortable in high-stress situations. They're very mission-driven, and they look for opportunities to support the community in that way.
Interesting. Is there a business or two you'd like to highlight?
I think, in particular, I talk about a fire safety business that was working as not only a veteran, but a veteran firefighter, working in CPR training that did, with the help of the PPP loan, was able to pivot his business into working within distribution of PPE equipment, and then again in COVID compliance training.
All right. Well, Holly, thank you so much for calling in. Holly Aker, Program Manager with the Veterans Business Outreach Center of New England. Tom Rainey, there's almost so many resources, it's hard to know where to start. Is your organization a good central place? Do you have all these resources under one roof to be able to connect people with the resource that might be right for them?
The short answer is yes. We keep track of all these different organizations, and we do serve as kind of the traffic cop sometimes, sending people off in different directions and matching them up with the resources they need. But I think what you're hearing here is that, Maine is a highly collaborative place. And I have to say that's kind of unique. I've worked in 8 different states in economic development, running business incubator programs and accelerators. And oftentimes in other places I've been, the economic development organizations have been highly, competitive with each other versus collaborative. And so we're fortunate here in Maine to have another sort of overarching organization called Maine Accelerates Growth, which has been fostered along by Maine Technology Institute, that pulls together a lot of the different organizations that are supporting entrepreneurs in Maine. So we can, coordinate and collaborate and share information on upcoming events. And it's just so exciting to see all of the different organizations working so closely together to support entrepreneurs. And like I said before, sharing, mentors, co-sponsoring each other's events, serving as guest speakers for different events. So it's just great. It's a great environment to be an entrepreneur in.
We are going to take another quick break. If you have questions about entrepreneurship in Maine, if you have a story you'd like to share with us, 1-800-399-3566. You can send an email, talk@mainepublic.org, post on Facebook, Instagram, or find us on Twitter. We'll be right back.
Listener support brings us Maine Calling with help from AARP Maine, advocating on the issues that matter to Mainers over 50 and their families. AARP.org/ME. By Thornton Academy, serving grades 6 through 12, hosting a prospective student day October 9th. Register at thorntonacademy.org/homecoming. And by Maine Community Foundation, where donors with a passion for Maine plan their charitable giving for the future. Learn more at mainecf.org.
I'm Scott Tong. A new study finds smoke from wildfires in Australia 2 years ago led to an algae bloom thousands of miles away, and that bloom is bigger than, well, Australia.
Not only do they impact local ecosystems, but they can have large impact on ocean ecosystems that are thousands of kilometers away.
That's next time on Here and Now.
Stay with us. Here and Now upcoming shortly at 12 noon today here on Maine Public Radio. Maine Public is pleased to be a media sponsor of the Ying Quartet in Concert presented by the Collins Center for the Arts in Orono. Join the Ying Quartet on Sunday afternoon, October 19th, as they perform at the Minsky Recital Hall, and Maine Public members are eligible for 15% off tickets to the performance. For details on the concert and the Maine Public member discount, please visit mainepublic.org and click on Events.
Welcome back. I'm Jennifer Rooks. You are listening to Maine Calling. Today on our program, advice for budding entrepreneurs, especially during a pandemic. Joining us, Renee Kelly with the University of Maine and Tom Rainey with the Maine Center for Entrepreneurs. You can join our conversation at 1-800-399-3566. Send a brief email to talk@mainepublic.org. Find us on Twitter, Facebook, or on Instagram. And I need to let you know that our Maine Calling Made in Maine gift guide will take place on November 12th this year. Feel free to email talk@mainepublic.org to be included in our guide if you have a product that should be included in the Maine Calling Made in Maine gift guide. We're going to go to Carla calling from Camden. Hi, Carla. Go ahead.
Hi, thank you. So your guests are great. I'm a member of the Maine Mentor Network, fantastic organization. And the focus of the call so far have been around consumer-driven businesses. My background and passion is in business to business, especially the manufacturing sector. So I'd like your guests to talk about the unique challenges for business to business and how the state is helping to meet those. Thanks.
Renee?
Sure. Well, certainly there have been challenges in manufacturing business to business operations this past year with supply chain disruptions and availability of labor. And those are some of the types of organizations the state has targeted some of this this funding for. But I think, the programs that Tom and I and many of our collaborators around the state run are really targeted toward either sort of the entrepreneurs who are serving their local communities, what I would call affectionately Main Street entrepreneurs, and then entrepreneurs who have a desire to develop either business to business services or products for sale and distribution outside the state of Maine. And both are really important to a healthy entrepreneurial ecosystem, if you will, in the state. And so I know Top Gun, for instance, that Tom runs in the food programs are really geared toward helping some of those companies think about how to sell their products outside of the state of Maine or their services. And many of the programs that we're developing also support those entrepreneurs who are trying to grow their businesses, scalable businesses, employ lots of people, and sell their goods globally.
Thanks for your call, Carla. An email here from Bill. My experience is that passion without a plan is just a dream. Many startups I see have the passion, but haven't studied just how they're going to market, advertise, and navigate the pitfalls. We'll go to Emerald calling from Bangor. Hi, Emerald. Go ahead.
Hi. My primary point of calling in is just to give a massive thanks and kudos to all of your guests today. Tom, Renee, everybody from the Maine Center for Entrepreneurship or the Foster Center, Maine Coastal Enterprises. I'm an entrepreneur who started a business during the pandemic, and it's been hard, and those resources have been invaluable because this is a time when we're all more isolated than ever before. And so anytime we, as entrepreneurs, reach out to these resource organizations, they are there, and they're eager to help us out. And so I can't be more grateful to all of those organizations because I've leaned on them all in the last year. And another thing I thought might be of interest to bring up is an extra challenge that the pandemic has brought, which is that I am an international business. And so my co-founder, based on our political climate, was really, really anxious about founding our business in the U.S. because she's not a U.S. citizen. And so we ended up founding in the U.K., and that's made it really, really hard to access any of the grant funding available, legal support, and things like that. And in addition, a year ago, we thought maybe by now we could travel to see one another, and our clients were really hard time with our services to get off.
Oh, shoot,
so
Emerald,
the pandemic's gone on. Yeah.
We're losing you at the end. You're cutting in and out,
Oh,
but
no.
I so appreciate.
I'll wrap it up. It's been hard. The pandemic's hard, and I'm grateful to all of your guests because they really are a lifeline for us.
Well, thank you for calling in. An interesting point, Tom. We've seen this surge in entrepreneurship during the pandemic, record numbers of people starting their own business. Yet Emerald's pointing out that this is a really hard time to start a business. Do you have words for people who are doing it for the first time now that
Yes.
don't give up if you can do it now, you can do it anytime?
I would say, you're not out there on your own. There are lots of people around that are willing to help you and who are employed here in the state of Maine specifically to help entrepreneurs become successful. So, reach out to these different organizations you're hearing about. And there are trade associations, the Bioscience Association of Maine, for example, that specifically supports life sciences companies. There's Maine Outdoor Brands, a trade association. We're working with both of those trade associations now to stand up programs to help entrepreneurs in those spaces. So yeah, there's just a ton of resources out there. You just and if you're an entrepreneur out there listening and you have any questions about where you need to go next, please feel free to contact the Maine Center for Entrepreneurs. We'd be happy to either direct you to one of our programs or to one of our partners programs.
Emerald, thanks for your call. We're going to go now to Thaddeus St. John. Thaddeus is the founder of 93 Maine Electric Bike Cafe and the co-founder and managing partner of Lincoln in Maine Winery. Thaddeus, thanks for giving us a call. And you are one of these people who has opened a business during the pandemic. And not only that, it's sort of an interesting combination. Tell us about your decision.
Oh, well, thank you for having me, Jennifer. This is awesome. Honestly, the first thing that got us started with the winery, the biggest help was the Top Gun program and the Maine Center of Entrepreneurs. That networking was just huge and gave me life force to do an electric bike coffee shop. And I even joked that my mom says I need a fidget spinner because I've got coffee, bagels, electric bikes, and winery. All at one location at 93 Main in South Portland. And we just opened up our bagel and coffee shop in the morning, and we're a bike shop during the day. And it's been going extremely well. A lot of the support has been from the local community, and I couldn't be more grateful.
What challenges did you face?
I think, there was a lot. There was a lot of stuff going on throughout the world and the craziness. Opening up in a pandemic, we had to be cautious of, a lot of different things. And, as was said on the show earlier, you're kind of on an island. You're kind of by yourself. There are resources available, but that was kind of the biggest thing, is the mental strategy that goes into it of like, well, all right, well, let's see how this happens. And when we first opened up, we were looking at $50 to $100 of revenue a day, and now it's double that, and things are adding more and more. And you just gotta kind of give yourself a little bit of credit, and you gotta know that hopefully the worst is behind us, but we only roll, we don't stop. And having the resources available definitely made the challenges, like whether or not we were going to close or different outside factors. It just made you enthusiastic about keep going on and keep going for it.
So Thaddeus, I have to ask you, when you told people you wanted to start an electric bike cafe winery, did anybody look at you and say, yeah, that's a little nutty?
Yeah, multiple people, Jennifer. I've gotten that quite a bit, especially from the city code enforcement officer. He's like, why don't you just stick to a coffee shop?
Well, and that's a question I wanted to ask my experts here. Tom, I have a feeling that probably people come to you and you have to practice your straight face and say, oh, that's interesting. And how do you balance that sort of like, I don't see it, but maybe if you see it, other people see it as well. Tell me about, obviously, most of what we have in our world today at some point was a wacky idea. And now we take a lot of things for granted that at some point in the past were somebody's wacky idea.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So when Thaddeus came to us, we were running a Top Gun that was themed around craft beverage. As I mentioned earlier, we've tried to focus some of our resources on some specific industries that are that have some significance in Maine, and where we have some strategic advantages. So craft beverage is one of them. And Thaddeus was working on this delicious rhubarb vermouth that he invented, which was fabulous. And who would have thought rhubarb vermouth, but when you tasted it, it was fantastic. So yeah, so we end up having a lot of interesting ideas bounced off of us. We try to keep a very open mind, and we try to surround folks with people who can be encouraging, but at the same time can provide a bit of a reality check. We talked about competition, the competitive landscape earlier, and sometimes we point out that there are other people already doing that and have been doing it, this maybe running a similar business for a long time. So we have to, sometimes interject that and curb folks' enthusiasm. But Thaddeus was great. We really enjoyed working with him, and I'm thrilled to hear of all the other things you're doing now and all the successes you're having.
Well, Thaddeus, we wish you well, and we thank you for calling in, and we want to thank you for proposing this show topic. Thaddeus St. John, one of the people who encouraged us to do a program about entrepreneurship in Maine, and we really appreciate that. We're going to move on to Alex, who's calling from Southwest Harbor. Hi, Alex. Go ahead.
Hi, Jennifer. Thanks for squeezing me in. I just wanted to call and talk about my husband's business. He's not available right now, but his business is called the Exercise Design Lab. It's located in Bar Harbor. He is a neuroscientist. He works at the intersection of neuroscience and exercise, so designing specialized exercise programs for people. His website can be found at exercisedesignlab.com, but also I wanted to mention, if no one's mentioned it yet, that his business is listed on Black-Owned Maine, which is a great resource for across the state if anyone's looking to support Black-owned businesses.
Well, thank you so much for calling, Alex. One more time, what's the name of his business?
Exercise Design Lab.
All right. Thanks so much for calling in. Renee, I know you want to tell a story about somebody who just started during the pandemic and then had to pivot.
Yeah, one of our student startups named Kinotech had developed this technology that allows someone to visualize movement in the body. So if someone does, let's say, an exercise, they can actually see how the bones and muscles and tendons are interacting. And they thought, we're going to pursue the athletic field. So go after professional sports teams. And they started to do some communication with those teams. And then the pandemic hit and all the teams stopped playing. And there was just really no opportunity to pursue that particular market. And so they started to explore more significantly, although they knew it was a possibility all along, the healthcare market. And that's where they've ended up going. And they now have the product in the hands of chiropractors and physical therapists who are using it to help guide their clients in improving their mobility and health. So the pandemic, if it hadn't been for the pandemic, they might have gone longer down that pathway, which might not have been the most fruitful pathway for them in the end.
Tom, I want to wrap up by circling back to something you said earlier in the program, where you said this is maybe a once in a lifetime opportunity for many opportunities in terms of some of the government funding that will be coming down the line, in terms of grant funding because of the pandemic and because of some of the big stimulus money that's coming from the government. And I'm wondering if you could talk about timing. What do entrepreneurs need to know in terms of getting their act together, getting their paperwork together to take advantage of some of that?
Okay, so this is coming out of the Maine Jobs and Recovery Plan of 2021, and this is something Governor Mills and the state legislature laid out a roadmap for deploying $1 billion in funding that's coming in through the American Rescue Plan. And so various state agencies all around Maine will be receiving funding that they are going to be tasked with deploying and getting out into the business community. The Maine Finance Authority, the Finance Authority of Maine, I should say, is one of the other organizations that will be receiving funding for a whole range of things. And that funding is supposed to start hitting in October. Later this month, MTI will be deploying $39.6 million over 2 years to help support small and large businesses. They'll be administering some funding. The last I heard, and again, things are still a little bit fluid because they're working out some of the parameters on how to get the funding out. But there's going to be $20 million for forest product businesses and innovation. The Department of Agriculture has $20 million to assist ag-related businesses. The Department of Marine Resources has over $10 million to support seafood and aquaculture businesses. The Governor's Energy Office, $2.5 million for clean energy businesses and innovation. So really, it's this like tsunami of federal and state funding that's coming our way. And our mission now is to try to get the companies in our network and other companies that are out there in alignment with these funds and understanding what the parameters are for accessing the funds.
So right away. And to talk to the association in your world, whether it's the association, like you said, the Maine Forest Products, or whatever it is that represents your industry.
Well, for example, on the Maine Outdoor Brands, we have a workshop we're putting on October 12th.
Great.
That's specifically focused on how to access this funding if you're an outdoor brands company.
I have to wrap up. Thank you so much for your time. Tom Rainey, Renee Kelly. I'm Jennifer Rooks. You've been listening to Maine Calling on Maine Public Radio.